Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to each of you. Mr. Alley, I understand that you have disavowed the defund the police movement.
Senator, I've made clear that I've never taken that position, and I wouldn't for any number
Even
of
though
reasons.
the senator did. Let me ask you about, I know you live in D.C., and so crime in D.C. The D.C. City Council has cut the police budget by $15 million. The resources for D.C. police were decimated, and crime is out of control. Yet, we've seen a former Trump administration official that was murdered and carjackings. So do you agree with what the D.C. City Council is doing to defund the police?
Senator, as I've made clear, I've never taken the position of defunding the police, nor would I. And I've worked closely with law enforcement precisely because I care, in addition to accountability, about public safety very deeply, including in the district.
Thank you for that. I do want to talk with you about some of the clients that you've represented. I do a lot on protecting women and children, and you have filed a number of briefs in federal court representing rapists, terrorists, and child sexual abusers. And every criminal defendant deserves adequate representation. We talk about that here in this committee, and I want to be sure to get you on the record about your involvement in some of these cases involving child sexual abuse material. The chairman has done a good bit of work on that. We recently had a nominee come before us, Seth Aframe, who refused to follow sentencing guidelines in a horrific child pornography case, and the guidelines were for a life sentence, but he sought 60 years. So given your previous work representing the interest of criminals with child sexual abuse, I want to get you on the record. Is there ever a scenario in which you would deviate from the sentencing guideline recommendations of life imprisonment for a crime involving the sexual abuse of a child?
Senator, if I could just say at the outset, I have represented multiple victims of violence. I have represented, the center has represented numerous people who were victims of child abuse and child sexual abuse. And so I have seen firsthand how devastating that can be to families.
So let me ask you about Hire versus the Bureau of Prisons. You recall that?
I'm not familiar with that
Well,
one.
the MacArthur Center filed an amicus brief on behalf of a criminal defendant who was previously convicted of unconscionable conduct, abducting a 10-year-old boy at knife point, raping him, burying him alive. It's horrifying. And the defendant also admitted to molesting more than 40 children. Think about that. So it is my understanding that when this amicus brief was filed in 2019, you were overseeing the center's DC office. In fact, you've been an integral part of the center's work for many years. So are you comfortable with the center's representation of a defendant who committed these heinous acts?
So, Senator, let me just say at the outset that the center has represented a number of people who are victims of child sexual abuse and horrific.
This is a child
crime.
molester.
Yes,
This is a child abuser that the center filed an amicus brief on behalf.
I was just acknowledging the kind of seeing firsthand how devastating that can be. I think it's important at the outset of discussing any of these sorts of issues. I'm not familiar with the matter you referred to. I was the director of the DC office. I wasn't the director of the entire organization or overseeing all of the amicus briefs. So I'm not familiar with that particular case. I'd be happy to look into it and understand the context. I can tell you, though, Senator, that when we file an amicus brief in a case, it is not about the specific tragic fact. It's about a broader principle of law that is applicable beyond that particular case.
Thank you. I want to move on. Judge DuBose, I want to come to you. I know that there's been discussion about you saying that using the I was in a Marxist phase. and an explanation for that. Do you understand why that causes us pause?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And yes, it does. And I have to say, when I was given a copy of that article yesterday, I was shocked. I had no idea. When I read the article, I couldn't understand the context. If you had that opportunity to read it, there were some things that were placed in quotes. There were some points where the student was writing about herself. So as I sit here today, don't even recall having that
As
making
you
that comment.
sit here today, will you right now disavow the basic tenets of Marxism?
As I mentioned, Senator, I am not, nor
Is
I've
it
ever
yes or
been.
no?
I am not a Marxist. I do not espouse Marxist theory or ideology. I never have. I never will. I'm a very proud Democrat here and part of a Democrat. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.